All right, everyone, welcome back to part 3 on the $100 Facebook Marketplace Colt. And we are deep into the suck on this one. As you can see, we've got a bunch of stuff torn apart. Stick with me till the end of the video. The exciting news here is that this thing is running way better than it was in the last video when we got it running for the first time. It was a dumb mistake on my end, but I'm happy to report that it is running well. I've got a couple of things that I'd like your advice on throughout this video, so let me know in the comments on that stuff. But why is this thing torn apart? Well, the brake was locked up, as you've seen before. So I went to take the gear case off because that's required to get to that brake system. Got to take the secondary off. Of course, that was seized. I ruined that stud that is welded into the chassis in the process, so I've got that replaced. But I wanted to take the drivers out of here to replace that PTO side bearing that the drivers clocked themselves into. Mine is super crunchy. It's a known failure. But while I was doing that, something that of course I was afraid of here is the drivers that were in there are super brittle. Those are going to need to be replaced. That's a $125 bill to do that. Sucks, but what do? These are the spares that I got with the sled. So one of the things I want your advice on, and I've been looking at here, is this track. Now, I know that people do rubber conversions on these. This track is not missing any of the cleats as of now, and they feel pretty solid. But as you can see here, we've got some weather checking. So is that normal? Am I wasting my time looking at this track? I can tell you that the track that I got with it as a spare is worse than this one. So let me know what you think. The skid is looking okay. That spring and shock setup, that all feels pretty good, honestly, other than being squeaky. Now, let's go over to the bench here, and this is what I have mainly been working on, which is trying to figure out what parts do I want to use to put this thing back together between the replacement gear case that I got with it and the gear case that was on there. So this is actually the back half of the spare that I got with the sled. Why do I want to use this one? Well, mainly because of this brake area. You can see this is where the pad normally rides, the stationary one. Well, compare that to the one that came on here. You can see the pad is actually still in here. That is completely worn down. You can see that the rotor was wearing against this. The rotor was actually seized. Nastiness. Instead of messing around with this, I'm going to use that spare. I'm going to use the rotor that came on that spare as well, but I've actually got to use this brake backing piece from the original because the one that came on the spare has a bunch of broken off tabs. So again, hodgepodge. I'm going to use the secondary clutch that came with the sled just because this one is rusty. So I'm going to go ahead and put new bearings on the top and the bottom of this. Those are on the way. This is actually the cover that came on the spare. The reason that I'm using that is because I had a chip off of the other one. Now this is another thing I'd like to get your advice on. So these are the two different gear setups that came in it. This is the original. This came in the replacement. Now the bottom gear, same amount of teeth. The top gear is different by 2 teeth. Now I am thinking I want to run on the higher torque setup, lower top speed, and that's because I'm doubting that this thing is going to make the same amount of power that it left the Roseau facility with in 1973. So I'd rather err on the side of this thing might be a little boggy and crappy, so give it some more torque and sacrifice a few miles per hour on the top end. Let me know. Now, of course, need to rebuild this brake setup as well. This thing is the piston that rides in this bore. I'm going to clean that bore up. This is going to need some new EPDM O-rings, and it's going to need to be cleaned up as well. All that stuff is on its way. I want to give a shout out to Nutter Speed Shop. That guy's got a really good video on going through this on one of their sleds that they're setting up for a race series. All sorts of good stuff on there. Appreciate it. I'm going to be viewing his channel a lot more, and I'm sure a lot of you already do, but go check his stuff out if this is your kind of content. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm going to show you guys this thing running. The next video will be even better. We'll be putting a bunch of stuff back together and getting this thing even closer to being able to rip around again. Now, one of the next things on the docket here is getting rid of these old dry rotted spark plug caps that barely make any contact. So I picked these up on eBay. They're not the cheapest thing in the world, but they are really nice. So I've got one installed here already. You can see these are nice and thick. They have the clamp on the wire end, so these just twist into your original wire. So be able to reuse this. This is like egregiously long right now, which I like to have a little bit extra so that you can service this like I'm about to do. But this is kind of excessively long. So literally just snip this wire where you want it to, and your new spark plug boot just spins right in there. I'll show you. Snip. This is what the end of your wire looks like. You can see your little spike inside of there, kinda. Yes. Now we're just gonna toss this onto here. Tighten this clamp up for good measure. And then for good measure, P for PTO, M for mag. Now this is something I wanted to try out, see if I could get it to run a little better. You guys are going to roast me on this one, and well, you should, because it's pretty dumb, admittedly. But when I was taking apart the carburetors initially, not so much on this one, but the other, I guess I'll call it choke plunger, it's probably a more technical term, was really seized in the bore, especially on the mag carburetor. I fuddled it all up trying to get it out of there. And then in the last video that you guys would have watched, I didn't have that choke plunger in either one of these. Well, obviously there is an air path in there, so that's going to affect the way it runs. So I got 2 new replacement parts off the Polaris website. They're no longer brass like this one is. But now that we have new spark plugs, new spark plug clamps, we've got the pipe blown out, we've got our new choke plungers in here, and of course the mods from the last video with the new fuel system and a few other things. Let's see how well this thing runs now. Now, if you remember from the last video, when I had the sled running, we had all sorts of acorns and other crap blown out of the exhaust pipe. So based on some of your comments, I want to try and see if we can get some schmoo out of here, or if maybe we already ran it all out of there. So I'm going to start with just hitting it with 125 psi of air. I don't have one of those sealing rubber style tips, so I'm just hoping that the rubber glove or the leather glove does enough. Well, looks pretty clean to me, huh? Throw her back on. Okay, now that we've got choke plungers in here, we've got new spark plug end caps. The fuel system has been swapped out with some new parts. Saw that in the last video. Let's see if this thing runs any better with those few things. That's a start. Now bear in mind, I have no choke cable on here, and it is getting colder outside because the choke cable broke when I was fuddling with that choke plunger on the mag side. Well, it's idling. It didn't idle before. It sounds like it's idling a little high. Let's give her some revs. That's a whole lot better than it was. Way better. Well, there you hear it. I mean, it's running way better than it was the last video. It's idling on its own. It sounds like it's idling a little high, but overall this thing is revving out way better. Idling without any input. I didn't have to use a bunch of throttle to get it to start, so that's awesome. Now I want to drive this thing.